When it comes to stewardship, our approach to finances is a key reflection of our commitment to God's principles. Our handling of even the smallest financial matters reflect our commitment to stewardship. And by being faithful and wise with the resources He has entrusted to us, we demonstrate a heart ready for greater responsibilities in the kingdom of God. So I'm really excited about this video because I want to say for the first time ever, I'm actually going to break up all of these finance related topics and talk to you in a couple of levels on here's how you get started to here's how you become an expert. And we're kind of going to break down each steps, what you need to do to get to each one of those points. So in this video, we're going to focus solely on financial stewardship. And in the following videos, we're going to talk about other things like time and health and other areas of our life where we need to excel at as a steward. Let's get started. In Proverbs 23, verse 3 and 4, I'm reading in the New King James Version, it says, "Through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established by knowledge. The rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." So it's saying that through wisdom, a house is built. And if you're going to build a house wisely, you start at the foundation, right? Fundamentally, when it comes to being a good steward in our finances, that foundation is our budget. And I know I talk a lot about this on this channel, but again, it's fundamental. If you don't get budgeting correct, you're not going to get anything else correct because you're not going to have any money left over to give, to invest, to do any tax planning, any of it. So budgeting is crucial. So if you're just getting started on this journey, I want to talk to you about budgeting level 1, and that's just getting to know your numbers. Luke chapter 14, verses 28 and 30. Is there anyone here who planning to build a new house doesn't first sit down, figure out the cost, so you know if you can complete it? If you only get the foundation laid and then run out of money, you're going to look pretty foolish. That's the Message version. So what he's really saying here is like, you need to understand when you're going to build out a house or any other project for that matter, what is it actually going to cost? What's it going to entail? What's the plan behind this? And this is where budgeting comes in. So I have an entire video on this and you can check out, I'm going to link it here above. But what you got to do is you got to know how much money is coming in. You got to know how much money is going out. If you're old school and you prefer to just do this on a spreadsheet, pen and paper type style, I'm going to throw a link below. That's a Google Sheet. And you can kind of play with the numbers and the figures so it suits you and your family. If you are slightly more tech savvy or you prefer to take a more hands-off approach, there is an app that I use that's called Rocket Money. I absolutely love this app. I think out of all of the budgeting apps that I've tried over the course of the years, this is the one I've been able to stick with the longest. It does a lot of things extremely well. My favorite is being able to create rules. So if you have an expense and you kind of categorize it a certain way and it happens recurring, you can kind of tell the app like, hey, if the expense has this title or this name, this is the category it goes into, or ignore it, or whatever, you know, the thousands of rules that it has. But it essentially learns with you. And as you are getting better and better at budgeting, this app is going to learn. There's also a feature in it that if you don't really want to pay the full rate for the monthly cost, you can actually name a price and lower it down to, I believe I only pay about $3 per month. I'm going to throw the link in the description below as well. Feel free to check that out. In this level 1 of budgeting, I think you need to focus on saving money, having money saved up. The majority of Americans don't have $1,000 saved up for an emergency. So when an emergency does happen, they have to go to their credit cards and take money out of, the ATM, where the rates on cash out of a credit card is absurd. So you want to save, and Dave Ramsey, if you know who he is, he calls this baby step number 1, where you get $1,000 saved up. So I want that to be your focus, and we're going to build on it. So if you got that taken care of, level 2. So level 2, essentially, maybe you have 1 to 3 months of complete expenses saved up, right? You're hitting more and more consistently, you're hitting your budget. And at the same time, you're understanding that you can play offense and defense. So level 2 is not just about playing defense and trying to save up money, but also generating more income. That's what offense is, right? So the way I look at it is, if your income is X and you have some additional time. I'll share a personal example with you. So there was a while back when I didn't live here in Florida, but I moved out of state and I had a lot of free time. I didn't have a ton of friends. My local church didn't need me as much. So one of the things that I did to add to my income was drive Uber. And I would do Uber Eats or I would do Lyft. And I mean, you're looking at, 10, 15 additional hours per week, a couple more on the weekend. at the end of the year, that is a significant sum that you can add to your budget and do, whatever you want with that. And then you can also play defense, right? Which is cutting. What can you cut out of your budget? I know this is a hard one, but there's certain things you're just gonna have to make a decision that getting 1 to 3 months saved up is very important. And the other objectives you wanna hit, like paying down debt or investing, are also very important. And they are ultimately more important than perhaps having a Spotify paid subscription or a Netflix subscription or 2 subscriptions at the same time, right? I know some people who have Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN. Well, they're all Disney now, but then they have Netflix and they have Amazon Prime and like 16 others. Like, you're really not gonna watch all those shows at one time. You only have 2 eyes. So maybe, that's something that you can knock off the plate. By the way, Rocket Money will negotiate these subscriptions for you, or they'll cancel it for you. So that's actually pretty interesting. So level 3 is all about understanding your budget now in depth. You have been able to generate additional income. You have been able to reduce your expenditures to the bare bones. And now you notice that you can actually save up a lot more money. If you are head of a household, so maybe you're living by yourself, or you're married but you don't have kids yet, or even if you have kids, my recommendation is you have up to 6 months saved up. The way that you do this, you set up a different checking account, hopefully something that has high yield. Personally, I like Vero Bank, but there's a couple of other ones that you can use, SoFi Bank and M1 Finance. They all have pretty high yields right now. And leave that money there. 6 months of expenditures, completely liquid, just sitting there. You don't touch that money. You're not going to invest with that money. You're not going to buy Bitcoin with it. Nothing. It just sits there in case of a medical emergency. Something happens to your car, whatever happens, life happens, you now have funds set aside just for that. Keep it in mind, guys, that if you budget well, one of the things that Luke 16 tells us is that if you are faithful in the little, you'll be faithful with the lot. So you need to understand how to manage money, and that is not by having a lot of money. When you have a lot of money, it's actually easy to manage. You can easily do everything you need to do with it. It's hard to manage when you have a little, and how to grow it. That's what stewardship is about. It's about managing the resources that the Lord has entrusted to us, not necessarily the amount. It could be $1, it could be $1 million. You're still managing something that belongs to the Lord. So one of the things I want to throw out there is, I think you guys know by now, I have a biblical budgeting guide. And if you want to get a hold of that, just shoot me a message on Instagram, FianaJ7, and I will happily send you the link to that, and you can grab it and check it out. And it includes a ton of Bible verses and how I personally do things, and spreadsheets, and how I use the app, etc., etc., etc. I think it'll be a good resource for you, and I'm happy to shoot that your way. All right, so the second thing we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about it in the 3 levels, is investing. By the way, there are chapters to this video, so if you want to skip around, maybe you already understand everything about investing, so you can skip this section. But there are other sections that if maybe you want to go back to, you didn't understand well enough, you want to listen to it again, whatever it happens to be, feel free to skip around. So investing. Now that you got your budget correct and you have 6 months saved up, but your budget is still in place. It's not like you get to that and then the budget goes out the window. You're always going to budget for the rest of your life. So you might as well get used to it. But this is what you're going to do with the money that's left over. In a culture that is driven by greed, by financial freedom and passive income and the American dream, what I want to tell you specifically about investing is that you need to seek the Lord when you are making financial decisions, whether big, medium, small, whatever they happen to be. Seek the Lord. He will give you wisdom beyond any YouTuber, Instagram person, multi-billionaire, Dave Ramsey, Grant Cardone, whatever camp you happen to be on. Seek wisdom from the Lord. Seek wisdom in prayer, in fasting, in scripture, because only God knows the right guidance for your life in your specific situation. With that being said, understanding that things like financial freedom, the American dream, I don't believe those things are biblical, and I'll get into that. So Luke 12, starting in verse 15, which is the end of a story and beginning of another parable, but he says, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I know,
I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. I love this passage because it tells us a lot, right? So one of the things that I never understood is like, hey, this is an entrepreneur. This guy, based on what we know from the short parable, is that he's a hard worker. He has managed his resources well. He's got people working for him, right? Because he's got crops and he's got these barns and they're filled with crops, and like his business is even booming. But there is a critical aspect to this verse that not only does it talk against the American dream of like, hey, my goal is to retire. Not only does it just talk against that, but it also says something very interesting. He says, I need to store my grain, which is the essence of his business. Now, there are families, there are other people who are going to be without a job. He is not taking what he's doing and growing it, but instead he decides to, liquidate his business, get all of the cash out so that he can spend it on himself, so that he can drink and he can eat and he can be merry with complete disregard to others. And at that point, he becomes a bad manager. So what this passage is doing specifically, it's asking us to reevaluate our goals. When we're thinking, hey, this is what the world's saying, this is what Scripture's saying. This is what the world says about retirement and the American dream. This is what Scripture says. Financial freedom, often touted as a modern goal, finds no explicit endorsement in the Bible. Timothy 6:9 says, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. The pursuit of financial freedom for its own sake can lead to spiritual pitfalls, distracting us from the true essence of biblical stewardship. What I'm trying to get at is, as an investor now, which if you're a level 1, you're becoming, if you're a level 3, you already are, is what is your goal? What is your vision for investing? Who are you investing for? What are you investing for? It's important to understand that you can have a phenomenal portfolio here on earth and have a completely empty portfolio in heaven. And that's not the purpose of this channel or this video or what I'd like to get out. The important is for you to be rich before God and in heaven first. And then these other things here on earth, with again, are being managed by us, but belong to Him. Level 1 is this is where you're just getting started. You just opened up a portfolio, you started investing some money, okay? My recommendation, get started with ETFs. Don't pick a specific stock because, I like Louis bag or Chanel or Dior, so I'm going to buy their symbol, LMHV or something, because they represent all of these brands and I like that. That's not how that works. There's a lot of technicalities behind it. With an ETF, what that does is it's going to pool a lot of different stocks into one stock, one share, and that share has fragments of different companies. So for instance, if you bought like a share of the S&P 500, Apple would probably be 5%, Google would be 5 or 7%, and these other stocks would make up like miniature fractions of that overall pie. You can then do this for a ton of different sectors, right? So you can get these ETFs for the healthcare sector or for the energy sector or for the transportation, whatever it happens to be. But these ETFs include hundreds, if not thousands of different stocks, whether it's dividends, whatever it happens to be. If you have questions on how you should break down your portfolio, you can DM me below, just shoot a message below, I'll respond. I don't know if that's something you guys are interested in, but if it is, just let me know. The app that I use is M1 Finance. And the reason I use M1 Finance is for a few reasons. One, it allows me to have a checking and a saving account. So I actually hold long-term funds for investing in my M1 checking account, not the investment account. Now, another really cool feature about M1 is that you can actually leverage your stock portfolio. So if you said, hey, Jay, I'd like to, use my stock, and the ultra and uber wealthy do this, right? I want to leverage my stock to get a loan, and I'm going to put up my stock portfolio as collateral. You can do that in M1 Finance. I'm not saying that's something you can do, you should do. I'm just saying it's an option if you want to do that. And then last but not least,
Their UI and platform, absolutely amazing. Once your account has more than $10, $15, $20, it will actually buy your portfolio. So if you set up a pie and you got several different ETFs, maybe one or two individual stocks because they do high dividends like whole realty, then it will make that purchase for you, and it will keep things completely or perfectly allocated so that you're not actually worrying about, hey, I have too much of this stock in my portfolio. Now my risk is like through the roof, so let me sell some. It does all of that for you. And it's automatic. It's not made for day traders. It's not made for people who want to, I need to buy this stock this minute. That's not what it's made for. It's made with long-term in mind. All right, so that's level one. Level two. Level two, I consider someone who has more than $10,000 invested in a stock portfolio, and at the same time, they found a habit into adding into that portfolio. So there's a thing called dollar cost averaging, which means you're just consistently buying. You're not trying to time the market and wait until the market hits a low because now I'm gonna buy. Like, that's not what you're doing. You're in the habit of consistently investing. So every month, every week, whenever you get paid, there's money left over. You are putting that money into M1 Finance. M1 Finance is making a purchase. You are consistently investing. That's level two. Now, level two, we also start to kind of, open up that funnel a little bit so that you're investing in different things. 401k, a 529 plan, and I'd like to talk about those with you. So level two, if you're a dad, you need to have some sort of, game plan set for your kids when they go to college, when they get married, when they want to buy a car. What is that game plan? So we're going to continue talking about this on level three, but level two is if you plan on a yearly basis to invest less than $10,000, I would recommend you do have a 529 plan. And if you don't know what that is, just Google it really quick, but it's a tax saving college plan where your kid does need to use this for college. The interesting thing that, at least here in my state, you need to look at yours, but in my state, I can actually use that now. So Stella is at an age point where I don't have to wait until she's 18. If I deposit money into her 529, I can use the 529 to pay for any educational expenses, including things like daycare. So just take a step back for a second. Let's assume you pay $100 a week in some sort of daycare, private school, whatever it happens to be. You can take money out of your budget, which is gonna go to that daycare anyways. You can put it into the 529, and now you can write that off in your income, right? So if you're in the 20% bracket, that 20% is just now written off. So you got essentially a 20% discount on that. And now the rest of the money goes from the 529 to the daycare, and you just save yourself 20%. So that's a cool hack. So then we go into 401ks. And I don't have time to go into every detail in this video, or we're gonna be here forever. But I do have specific videos on all these topics. So just head over to my channel and find what you're looking for if you wanna go a little deeper into it. So the same thing goes for 401ks, right? If your company offers a match, you need to take that because it's free money. And at the same time, it's also gonna serve as a tax write-off for you. I would say if I had a match, I would probably do the 401k even before stocks, because just like you're not gonna be able to control stocks, you're not gonna be able to control what the 401k does, but you take the advantage of getting the free money, the match, and at the same time, it's a write-off. So at the end of the day, it's a more efficient game plan, but most people don't have that, and I get it. I actually don't have a match at my company. I do have a 401k. I do max it out because I need it for my tax saving, but at the same time, it's not like it's doing amazing things for me, and we'll talk about that in level three. The other thing I'm gonna mention, and we'll talk about this, is if you have more than $10,000 to put away for your kids per year, and you have more than $15,000 to put away for your 401k, so we're talking now $20,000. One of the things you should do is not put money in the 401k and the 529, regardless of the tax savings, and I'll tell you why. For a while, I actually did do that, and I had a decent amount saved up in the 529, a decent amount saved up in the 401k. So what I did, I just kind of paused those things because you have no control over them. So the 529, I can really only use it for one thing, or if you pull the money out, you're gonna get taxed. The 401k, same thing, and I'm only gonna touch that money when I'm 62, 65. That is a long way for now, for me. And even if I get there, if the Lord calls me to heaven sooner, we'll talk about that later on too. You should have a will, but you should have something that you can control. So if you're gonna invest more money, one of the things that I am trying to do personally is, instead of me having a 529 plan for Stella, I would rather give her a rental property or a business that she can now run. And if you compare the tax advantages of a rental property and the tax advantages of a 529, and you crunch the numbers on a Google Sheet, you're going to see that the rental property, because it has cash flow, tax appreciation, or depreciation, and appreciation, it's infinitely a better vehicle to build wealth than a 529 is. But if you are not, investing a decent amount of money to get that rental property, you might as well do the 529 or the 401k. So again, it just depends on your use case and where you're at with your finances. It's important for you to kind of crunch the numbers and know where you're at. Ultimately, I look at Proverbs 13:22 that says, a good parent, a good person, a good steward leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So when you ask me, Jay, why are you paying for Stella to go to school? Well, number one, I'm not going to pay for the whole thing because I think that takes away from her experience and enabling her to participate in doing that herself, right? It's going to be a good accomplishment when she says, hey, we did this together, Dad, as a family. So I think that's important. But at the same time, I am not thinking to myself, hey, I need to put my daughter through school or my kids. What I'm thinking about is, hey, I need to invest this money wisely because there are people out there who are counting on me to help them get their kids through school. And I need to help get my grandkids through school. It's not just 1 or 2 or 3 kids. I mean, when you expand your vision in your mindset, I'm thinking about a lot of different people that I want to be able to help. And you got to be a good steward if you're able to do that. So one thing I forgot to mention on the first take is that it's okay for you to invest in things like SPY as you're getting started. But as a good steward, I made a video about this, about the top 5 Christian ETFs, because as a good steward of the resource that the Lord has given us, one of the things you have to account for is when you're investing in things like Apple and Google and like pretty much all of the stocks that you think are good and you want to invest in, when you look at what these companies are doing, how they're affecting the world, how they're affecting, the Christian worldview through the political climate, it gets pretty crazy. So companies like Apple, who are consistently investing in LGBT community and their rights and pushing this agenda that doesn't have a biblical worldview, is that really something you want to be investing and putting your money into? So what I did is I created this video that includes, like I mentioned, the 5 Christian ETFs that you can invest in, that it is going to limit your return from the standpoint that they're not companies as massive as Apple, but these aren't crappy companies either. These are companies that are doing something meaningful. There's a great book that was on my desk somewhere. I think I took it somewhere else, but it's called The Faith-Driven Investor, and it's written by Tim Keller as well as Kathy Wood, who is essentially a fund manager. She's amazing, but she's got these ARK Invest. You can Google this, but she's got billions of dollars in assets under management, and there is an ETF. She has several ETFs that you can essentially get into that are a little more conscious. The same is true for this 529 plans. So a couple of years ago, I attended a conference for biblical Christian crowd, right? And there were a lot of Christian financial advisors there. One guy was presenting and he's talking about 529 plans, and he said something that blew my mind. Most of the 529 plans here in the US invest in tobacco companies, so cigarette companies and whatnot, right? Now, these tobacco companies are all typically put together and made and assembled in countries like Indonesia. You go to Indonesia and you see that a lot of the workers for these tobacco companies are children, and they pass law in that country where kids can smoke. And if you Google this, you're going to see that there are kids that are 5, 6, under a year old that are addicted to tobacco and nicotine. And we are investing our children's futures in these 529 plans. And while we are preparing our kids, we are absolutely devouring and destroying an entire generation of kids in other countries. So when we're talking about being a good steward and conscientious investing, biblical investing, these are matters and things that need to come to mind. It's not just about earthly profit, but it's about an eternal reward in heaven. And as a good steward, that's what needs to be going through our heads as we're doing these investments.